all these resources you can actually just view online that have templates and presentations. And so this, what I'm pulling from is pulled from some of those resources. But I do know we have a lot of friends in the area who are going through the specific trainings, like Yodit, who was, a lot of folks know Yodit, and others who are being trained specifically in sociocracy framework. And this might be something that members of this organization might want to go through as well.
That's real quick. I need to pull your presentation back up. Which screen is it? I start recording. Okay.
Thanks. Where are they? Oops. I don't know where our Zoomers went, but and so what we'll talk about in this basic 101 focuses on parts that ICPJ will be using that you'll have a chance to practice in circle breakouts. Okay. Oh, slideshow. Intro. Thank you. Perfect. So one of the main pieces for sociocracy is really around consent-based decision making. And I'm really excited about this because I feel like, again, to some of the conversations we've been having, it's really around trying to understand, think about more inclusive decision making that helps to move processes forward while also not holding up all the different domains from moving as needed. And it's also a recognition that it's hard to get to 100% agreement. And so this asks us to really push our range of tolerance, like what is good enough, as well. It centers on one, having clarity about an aim. So which could be a description of what the circle does. It's actionable and specific in its description. You'll see here, you'll almost see here, let's see here. I'll move you all down here. Kind of an attempt to take our mission and create an aim out of it. We want to create positive community change by bringing people together to learn and practice nonviolence and democracy in their everyday lives, right? So then as we think about if we say that this is our aim, then the different kinds of, as we think about our decisions that we would make, we would keep that in mind, right? And so this part where it talks about integrating objections is that we would have a process and that people could bring up an objection and that they think would be a negative impact to this aim, to the aim that you put forward, right? So it's not so much just like an objection, like, oh, I don't really like how that sounds, right? But it's like, do we believe that this will negatively impact what the aim is that we're doing? And that they are named as specific objections to then move through. There's also an opportunity for folks who are outside of the circle to be heard, although they can't necessarily object. Each programming or organizing circle will take time and come up with an aim for themselves, and it should be thinking about, how they see the work, like how it's connected with the organization's aim and work, but also kind of what's specific to what would happen in their own circle. By having an agreement on the aim, it becomes more clear why an objection may be necessary or not, and kind of what the options will be to mitigate that. So that'll come up in a second. So this is the kind of basic process. So it's really kind of foundational. and helps the group to not get lost really in like spiral of indecision. So you start off by making a proposal. And so we'll break down what that looks like, but you'll make a proposal, somebody will put a proposal on the table, right? So based on what we're talking about, be like name change, community power, resiliency network proposal. And then you do a couple of rounds. So you have a round of reactions. So then the folks who are in the space can go around and say, hey, this is my thought, this is how I feel about that. And then as they go through that, people can make, as they go through that round, just to be clear, that people can say criticisms as part of their round. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will object to the proposal. And as a group, the group can determine, how to maybe make amendments to a proposal, but they might decide, hey, there's enough, we have consent here, we can move forward. And then, so you do that round of reactions and then you do a consent check. So as part of those rounds, again, a proposal can see some shifts happen, but not necessarily. The process is meant to be solutionary in design to help to find ways to move forward. And if there are objections that would happen, there are some different ways to move through that, some different modification options. So you might say, hey, we need to modify this in order to avoid a negative impact of what could happen. You could also say, hey, we're going to try this change for a specific amount of time, and then we're going to evaluate and see where we are and see if that's something that we should extend or not. Because all decisions don't have to be forever. Okay. And then also, you also can put something in to try to measure for the concern or track of possible harm. So if we say, well, we think if we do this, that this will cause harm in this way, right? So we could then modify the proposal to say, we want to track that. We don't want that harm to happen. So how can we measure whether that is happening so we know? Because, and if it doesn't happen, then that's great too, right? We can move forward knowing that this didn't actually create the harm that someone might have had a concern over. But this gives a way for us to modify a proposal so that we can kind of, again, get a check. So you go back, once you make a modification, you would go back and do a consent check again. Okay.
Is there an ideal amount of people? Oh, never mind.
Ask and you shall receive.
So, yeah, so in the circle, so this is kind of in their materials. They say a circle is like 4 to 8 people. Some of our circles, we might have circles that might be a little larger or not, but when it's actually in the work, even within our different caucus groups, there might be wider people who will be in there who might show up at different things, but the people who are showing up on a regular basis tends to fall more into this 4 to 8 people. And so just think about that. One of the things that I've always, with these things, it's always helpful for me because I'm a person, I'm like, I want to see like 20 people, everything, and, but as we go through a lot of these processes and a lot of these things a lot of folks who are talking about change movement work, they're like, actually, you need 3 people. I'm like, oh, 3 people, okay. So anyway, but I'm just saying it has shifted the way that I think about some of these things because it's like the conveners or the doers, and sometimes you have a smaller amount of people doing that, and then you have more people who can show up at something, maybe, right? But they're not necessarily in the group leading the decisions on the day-to-day. So about 4 to 8 members. And within those circles, you define your domain and your aim. So the domain is kind of the area that you are responsible for in your area of work, right? So what do you have authority and responsibility over? And then your aim is naming what is the work that you're going to be doing in that space. And so, for instance, with a lot of our circles now, they're really kind of in our maybe programming, organizing domain. And so they're broken up. Most of them are kind of by issue area. So it's kind of like your domain would be programming and organizing actions within this issue area, right? So that kind of is generally what it will be like. But when you're in your circle, you can get more specific about what that looks like. In each circle, there are these different roles. Okay, so this is where, again, this is how this builds up to being a better function of how things will move, is there's these different roles. So there's a leader who supports operational tasks, like convening the group. So for instance, like Leslie will send out an email to say, hey, y'all, we're meeting. As a reminder, right? So that's like a role that helps to remind people we're meeting, okay? So make sure people show up. So the convener will do that and helps the circle progress toward the aim that they determine. There's a facilitator who moderates the meetings. I put in here too, having accountability for our conflict resiliency practices. So making sure if things come up, that we have somebody to be like, hey, let me just name, we're in a conflict. This is a conflict. How do we want to actually address that conflict? That you have someone who will tend to that. Anyone can, okay? But you want to have someone who can tend to it. You have a secretary, a person who takes the notes and makes sure information is updated or communications are shared. And then a delegate who's a representative to the governance circle or the next higher circle that might be. But this role, I would say, is the most let's say external facing role. So like if we were to ever say, hey, we need somebody from each circle to come and talk at this convening, right? People would probably turn to the delegate as the first person to do that. Whether someone else can, that's great, but they probably would turn to the delegate as being a person who says, like, I'm willing to be an outward facing member of this circle. The thing I'll name too is that these names can change, and that's something where I was like, we should try, we're not gonna do it now, today, but that's something where I was like, maybe as a group, that'll be a practice for a proposal in circle. Like what names are more our vibe, I wanted to match what we want to put forward. So that's something we can kind of change what those names are, but just to understand the different functions, okay? And you'll see some of these are asterisks. So that's the leader and the delegate. Those are linking roles. So those roles will carry information back and forth between their circle and other circles. And they also are responsible for alignment checks. Okay, so this is one of those things that we're hoping will kind of break down some of these communication breakdowns, break down the breakdowns. Okay, so that there is ways where information is flowing from these different groups specifically, and that within that, if we're in a shared circle, that there's someone who's maintaining the alignment with the role that they play in their circle. So they're holding, here's what my circle, here's where we are, and they're bringing that forward in the next spaces. Also, the last thing to say too is that people can hold multiple roles. So you might have a person who is the delegate and the secretary or something like that, right? So there's ways that they might overlap. And there's a process for selection that we'll talk about, but that is a way that there can be possible opportunities for people to kind of be in different roles.
No, I think that was just in the kitchen. I was thinking it sounded like a door, but
They're making pies. They're doing God's work.
All right, so the circle structure allows a few different things. So clarity of where decisions are made, ability to make decisions within your domain. So this can take on like actions you can take, letters you can sign on to. So like Jan often is like, hey, there's this thing, can we sign on, right? And this new function, the people within the circle would say, Jan could be like, hey, I want to sign on to this. That's my proposal. People say, do it. And then it's done. Okay. So that's like an example, like things like that can sit within the domain. The domain can go, or the circle could then go through, make the decision and move. Policies people might want to oppose, right? So people are like, hey, should we come out against X, Y, and Z, right? Again, within the domain, someone can make those decisions there. Information can flow between the circles more seamlessly through linking and operational handoffs. There might be something where it's like, hey, we're going to be doing this up to this point, and then you do this. Or or this is the next thing, and someone's like, okay, we can take this on, right? So there's ways where then it can build, and then they can pass off the information as well. So it makes it easier to track how things have come to be where they are. You find that there's alignment building across the circles that will happen through the consent process. Allows us to be nimble and flow where more energy is needed. And then you can get feedback from the larger group that can support all the circles. So again, remember, people can be outside the circle and can attend, can like add feedback, but they can't block or object. But you can still get that feedback from others in this way. So what this will look like in terms of our shared decision making, there's a couple of different circles. So there's obviously our programming circles. There's the central circle, which is like the general circle, or the governance circle. The governance circle will have a delegate from each of the smaller circles. As you saw, those different roles. So that delegate then is a member in that shared decision-making circle, the governance circle. And they will make sure that each has what they need to function well, and really help to determine how resources are shared. And so again, could be staff resources, that could be the funding resources that we're bringing in. It could be that, hey, we need people to show up at this. Who across different circles can also show up? We'll also have, the governance circle will also make clear what gets decided where and which different spaces. So they might say, okay, somebody brings a decision, that sounds like that decision actually should sit in this group here, right? And so making sure that things are kind of moving like that. The governance circle can't override a specific circle, the individual circle's decision, even if they might have feedback on it. The compliance circle, so this is in part because we're a nonprofit. So even as we try to move into different kind of formations, we need to keep in mind some of these specific needs to be in compliance as a nonprofit. And at the most basic of levels, to be a nonprofit, we need a president, a treasurer, and a secretary. And so those will be in our compliance circle. And there could be other folks, we might decide we want more people in that space, but that circle will in particular be for that, but then also to hold projects that support organizational structure requirements and the bureaucratic work that happens. Some of us love bureaucratic work. I love knowing people who love bureaucratic work. But this circle might do some of that. So for instance, when we have some of these questions around things like, name change, like in this circle, they would be doing the work to be like, okay, what would that look like? What do we need to do? What paperwork do we need to file to make sure that that happens and make sure that we are doing all of our things to be in compliance, right? So that would be, that where that circle would be working through and making sure that we are compliant in that way. But there's other circles too. So we'll have a network staff circle, mission circle. And so the mission circle is where, holding progress toward the mission, but then also the conflict resiliency work and things of that sort will be held in that. And then there can be new circles that might come that could be either function. So for instance, the group might say, we need communications work. And so we need some folks that will focus on that. So there might be a circle that would come together to do these functions, operational functions. We need a circle that will focus on fund development. So there could be a circle that could become for that. Rapid response. It could be event planning. Like we just have this event coming up. We just need some folks, right? You know, we kind of do these ad hoc groups. So that would be just like an ad hoc circle. It's coming together just to plan. You know, we get that for the 60th anniversary, right? And then also just to stay within this too, that for our external facing communications, and things, you know, when we talk about like the board, I'm like, it's gonna be different. But what we would do for our board, it would be like our compliance circle plus our governance circle, maybe plus the mission circle, right? Like those would be, so just to know, like when we would do it, that would be what would make up our board. Even though it will function a little differently than most nonprofit boards. So, or actually it will function a lot differently from most nonprofit boards, but just to know that, you know, functionally, that this will be what will make up our board. I wanna show here, so again, we're coming over here, just to kind of get a sense of what it could look like. So this is not even what I would say kind of fully even of where we are, but I just want to kind of be able to talk through some options, right? So here we have our compliance, our president, treasurer, secretary, our governance circle, which have our delegates, as well as general community members can join in to those conversations. Our mission circle, mission and conflict resiliency, staff circle. But we could have, for example, the governance circle could say, hey, you know, we need some folks that will actually help to do welcome and onboarding. So we need a committee for that would help support the overall network, right? So they might create kind of the sub circle that would be connected to them, but that, so it could have members from all the different circles, right? But it would be kind of to do a specific task. Or it could be, we can have different things where there's, again, different needs that might happen, like network communications. We might decide to create a circle for that. We have some of our different programming circles here. So some ones I pulled out: interfaith, vote caucus, care and freedom, environmental justice, climate crisis mitigation, peace wagers, things like that, right? But off of these different circles, there can be a circle can have like a sub group, right? So it could be, so for off of the environmental justice one I have as an example, it could be like, we're gonna come together for a circle project. So the members of this group are from, you know, let's say 8 different orgs, right? In this circle, doing kind of 8 different focus areas. But in the circle, everybody is, or a good number of the folks are interested in data centers. So then they might say, we need a circle project on this. And so we create this, and the aim is to oppose data centers and AI proliferation, right? So it's a very specific area of work that's connected to this circle, but it is kind of a sub-circle of it. Under peace wagers here, we have a couple of different areas where people are interested in doing work. So there's both, in order to be peace wagers, we both need to build relationship. So we have some folks who are like, we're gonna do monthly potlucks in a study group and things like that, right? So those folks can be focused in that space. And there's other folks who might be like, hey, how do we build these skills in other people, right? So you might have folks then who are circled up around training and facilitation, okay? So this is a way where there could be, they're couched or supported by a larger circle, but then might have some break off or specific work that would happen that's in connection to that. Care and Freedom Circle has a group of folks that have been focusing on IPSI harm reduction policies, right? So then folks who are both researching, learning, and then going and doing some organizing and advocacy about certain policies in Ypsilanti. So they're going to the planning commission, they're going to city council, right? So, but they're kind of doing that, but that's not the totality of what can happen in the circle. It's just one of the specific pieces. I have on here, like vote caucus could have, can break out into election year committee. There could be an election year committee because we're moving in someone. So they might say, hey, we don't want this to overtake all of the work we do, but we also know that this is happening. So there might be some things that are specific. So some people might break out, okay? So you just see how that can happen. And then I have this space here, like there's other groups, right, that aren't here, but that would be, we could add in terms of what that could look like. So I just wanted to kind of put this out. I want to just take a quick break or quick pause just to see if anybody has any questions or additions, or if it makes sense what you're kind of seeing laid out here.
I guess I just wanna say that I think that sociocracy as a model, sometimes the language can seem really new. And it can be tempting to say like, our circle's just committees, like it's just like a new word for committee. And I think what the sociocracy model does for us is it creates a way that we can think of ourselves being organized that was really like a natural, like what was naturally occurring in ICPJ in many ways already. That people saw a need, they came together with a small group along with them to tackle that. And the sociocracy model of then having your, like the delegates, you know, who are coming back and then sharing to the governance circle, this is what we're doing. It's creating a communication structure, and it's creating like a way of having stronger awareness across a community that is like really still, it's designed to say, like, hold the values, hold the purpose of this organization, and to go do the good work. And as you do that, here's a structure you can use that we're gonna come back into and learn together. And it also really speaks to the power of the people doing the work and having that empowerment to say, do what you need to do. And come back in through the governance circle and share what that has been. Don't wait to be told what the good work is that needs to happen, because like you're the one who's on the front line doing it. So I just want to say that because I think it kind of like codifies a way of empowering community action, that this organization has empowered community action. But it also creates like some communication structure and learning opportunity that maybe wasn't as formal as before.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry, I didn't know. Okay.
I can put this on. I have a lot of questions, but I'm only gonna ask one. I'm just interested in, earlier on, you said that the circle itself could make decisions like about signing on to something, and signing their name. Are they signing it as in the circle's name or in ICPJ's name?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say it's ICPJ's name. I would say that we are putting trust in the different circles through our alignment and relationships. That if in this domain, that they would say we should do X, that then we trust that and let that move. So yes.
Thank you.
To piggyback a little bit on what Beth said, this can feel like a lot of new things, right? But it's actually the opposite. It's a remembering. Everything, have you heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the triangle? Yeah. So he actually got that thought. That was not an original thought. Okay, so that was First Nation and Indigenous thought, and it was circles, and he made it a triangle. A triangle creates a beginning and an end to what we need. Whereas the circle, which is the Blackfoot Indians and such, had this idea that our continuation of like, there's no I'm healed, there's no I'm ready, there's a constant readying, a constant healing, and the consistency of the circle. And so you do what you need for the moment, and you interact with other circles to see what you need. When you think about indigenous people or African tribes, there were hundreds and hundreds of tribes and indigenous people that didn't always speak the same language, but they had a way of getting what they need and getting what other people needed. Everybody got what they needed. And so the idea is that you, at this given point, I may need 40% of my physiological needs met and 50% of my physical needs met. You know what I'm saying? And so like right now, I think that I agree that this is the moment to own that, because we have situations where we have gone away from more innate and natural ways of doing things, and it's so top heavy, and we see it with the collapse of the American government, right? We've gone away from that. And so when I think about ICPJ, like you had that moment, I had a moment with the on November 9th, they had a ripple in Ann Arbor showing in Ann Arbor. And you notice ICPJ was mentioned, right? So at the moment, there needed to be a voice that said, I'm not gonna be anti-Black man, and I'm also going to understand that white women are scared, and we're gonna do this in love and not out of fear, right? And so we became that voice at that time in the 90s. And so it's meeting the moment. And I think that the circle structure just allows us to do it a little bit more smoothly. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's about clarity of where decisions are happening. I think that the way it is now, it is unclear. And it's also, but it's also like not wide enough. So for instance, as a staff member, as I'm making decisions, the things I've been bringing in, the proposals I made, is because I'm in conversation with lots of people. And so in those conversations, I'm hearing, I'm seeing gaps, and then I'm trying to adjust based on that. But that doesn't mean that everyone else in the organization is having those same conversations, right? But we also don't have a very good structure for at least, like, how do we make sure that that our decisions are taking these things into consideration, and how to have it be more clear where things are happening and how things are moving. And so I'm hoping that this will help to do that, so people can hear from each other directly more. And it doesn't have to all come through me necessarily, but that also that we're practicing what we want, which is for people to have more agency and people to see like how they are moving things forward. Beth, I see you took the mic.
Yeah, I wanna just like speak to this structure as a current board member. So I joined the board in June of 2024, so it's been I don't know, coming on a year and a half-ish, I guess. And as a board member, we rely so much on the input from the co-directors and now our acting director, and are out in community and in conversations, but also know that we operate in a blind. And I used to be the executive director of a national scale network, and in that case, I know the board members also often felt like they were acting in a blind because they could only be in so many spaces. And I think that the governance circle with delegates from the circles coming in to be able to say, this is what is happening, this is what our organization, our network, our members are seeing and doing, is like very comforting. And so I guess I just wanted to say that, because yeah, Des and Eleanor both, like, they spent so much time gathering information and often then trying to give us all this information. We meet monthly, the board meetings are open, I think right now they're the third Friday from 2 to 4. The first Friday, anyway, See, we'll get back to you on that, like. But we just spend so much time like trying to even know what's happening across the organization. Is this the right choice? Who said this? Who said that? You know, we're like in the structure, when there's a seat in a consent-based decision-making structure that says, okay, what's the decision that needs to be made? Let's talk about it. Will this decision harm the organization? No? Let's move forward. Will this decision harm the organization? Yes. How do we reconcile that harm? How do we avoid that harm? Okay, adjust. Now, can we move forward? It's just, it's like and I like it a lot. I was, yes. And like, we've been talking about it too. I just want to say too, as like a board, since the time that I joined the board in June or May of 2024, sociocracy was being talked about to me immediately, and I think it was talked about before that in one of the annual meetings. So this also is something that I know has been like kind of like steeping in the organization for not a, I don't want to say a long time, not like a long time. ICPJ's been around for a long time, but for a minute.
Yes, and I see Ali raised his hand, but just to say like, so when we brought Beth on, part of this was part of what we're seeing really as our transition board to help transition us from the typical board format to this new board format, which is why we have to actually launch, because otherwise we're gonna run out of all of our transition board members. And we've been trying to scaffold and build up the muscles and processes to be able to move into this new space. Ali?
The other day I got an epiphany when I had lunch with Des, and Des shared some of this with me. And when I left, I thought about it. I tried to place it in the here and now. And I thought about the aspect of harm and healing. And most commonly in those situations, if you look at physical or emotional, any type of harm, when you have the process of healing, that is regaining strength. And this is the time, in terms of where we are, that it's so important for us to gain strength, because it would be so easy to wallow in the harm and victimize ourselves. And in a way, I think that's what some people would like to see. But on the other hand, that's not what we, the people, want to see. We would like to see the healing, the regaining of strength, and then the action. And I think that's what we're seeing with this redeveloping of the focus or the mission statement.
Thank you. I'm gonna go through, because I know food is here, and there's just a couple more. Oh, wait, did you have? Oh, there's just a couple more things I just want to make sure to bring forward. So as part of this, as we go through, so some of the things that will happen and this within each circle, there's a selection process. So as a circle, you'll determine who will be in these different roles. Now, the other thing I'll say too is that they make sure it's not only for roles, it's just usually the first way that you go through a selection, but think of it, the selection as a box. It could be any other thing. You might select different things, but this is just the process for how you will go through. So you try to understand the role. So the group will determine like, what are the qualifications? What is needed to be the leader? What is needed to be the secretary, right? You just determine what those roles are. And then you explore the options. These are nominations. So people in the circle can nominate and people can self-nominate. But you do this in a round. So, once you understand the qualifications, then each person would go around and nominate. So this table, they would each go around and say, we nominate so-and-so. After you get those nominations, and again, you can self-nominate, then you can also do another round where people can change their nominations. Because sometimes you might say, like, we don't know who wants to do it. And then you hear, oh, this person really wants to do it. Okay? And then you might change. As part of that, you're naming the criteria, you're naming why you think this person, I'm nominating so-and-so because I think they would be a good fit for this role in this way. And so people can go, and that's part of what might, convince someone to change their nomination. And then you make a decision, a consent-based decision, say, hey, so the proposal is that we nominate so-and-so. Do they accept this? Do we consent? the group consents, then that role is filled, and you do that for each role. Okay, so that's just that's pretty simple. We do have, so you know too, there's some handouts, some things that will help kind of break this down a little bit more too. Proposal writing. So this is sometimes like the hardest part, as we've been doing this, we've tried this out in some different ways and it's still a practice. But first you want to be clear, like what is the problem that you're trying to solve for? Like what are you trying to solve? And then you go through this proposal writing process. I'll also say, so there's these different rounds, so you understand the scope of the solutions that might be possible. You explore the proposal idea that's being put forward. You synthesize the proposal idea, so maybe there's multiple proposals that might help to achieve something. And then you can, I'll just say, I know I'm like the same way, but these will be shared with everyone. I just with that. I'm just like, wow, is it just because I look really cute? I am wearing a throwback ICPJ t-shirt, so but anyway. So just to say that we'll share the information. But so you might synthesize, you might say, how do we bring these are both good proposals. Maybe there's ways to combine them. So somebody might do that. A lot of times that synthesis might actually happen in a breakout group. Like it might be one or a couple of people who take those proposals and then they come back with, here's how we synthesize this, right? And then you check for consent. To see if folks approve. The other thing to say, especially, for a really simple thing, like what are we gonna have for lunch, that might be able to happen right there, right? But for bigger questions or issues, it's unlikely that it would happen all at once, This process might take up to 3 meetings, just as a regular, right? Because first you might decide in one meeting, what is the issue we need to solve for, and what is the scope? What is it that we need to consider? That might happen in one meeting. And then you might come back at the next meeting, because in between meetings, you're saying, hey, think about proposals to this. And then in the next meeting, you might honor, here's all the proposals that people have. And then somebody might in between try to synthesize, and then you come back for the next meeting to give consent. So it doesn't have to all happen at once. So that way, just again, if we're talking about the time it takes to make a decision, it gives some natural breath into it, but it names that we're in decision-making time, right? Here's the thing that we need to make a decision on. Here's our timeline for how that's gonna happen. And we will make a decision maybe within 3 meetings, right? So it both tries to give some space, and as a group, you might decide, oh, we can move through it faster. But you also can have the space for if people need to think about things in between, because we know that happens, or if people wanna go and check. I like to do what I call taste tests. So I'll take something that's going on and I'll go and just talk about it with people and see how they feel about it, see what sounds good. So, you might do that and then come bring it back. Anything else? And then I think that just when thinking about, there's some different ways of the terminology of how you'll say it. So when you make a proposal, it's I think we should, So it's just different ways that you can kind of clarify what it is you're trying to put forward into space. And then how you would move through to this consent. And then really kind of the end part here is lead, do, measure. So that you make a plan, you carry out the plan, and then you evaluate the outcomes. And so that's the lead, you make the plan, you do it, and then you measure. So you can evaluate. So there's different things where we can figure out how we build in natural feedback moments. You can also, when we think about different policies, again, you can give them terms so that it's we will try this policy out for the next 3 years. And then that invites a natural evaluation period. So how did that work for that? So you want to think about how you do that just to kind of stay in that practice. You do performance reviews of the people in those roles. So the first one is the nomination process. That's the first performance review. When people say, oh, this person, we think that you're gonna be good because of X, that's them saying that they've already noticed your performance. So that's one time, but you might have something where you check back in. Maybe you hold that role for 6 months, 12 months, and then you kind of reevaluate as a group. Do we need someone else in this role? Is anyone else interested, etc. And then you also just have opportunity for feedback from others. I think that's on my side. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop the share. And just see, so, we're about to break for lunch, but I just wanna see if there's anything else kind of thinking about this overall. I know I rushed through this part because we took a little bit more time at the beginning part. But yeah, is there anything, questions, thoughts folks have about the circles, the sociocracy, how we see how it's gonna like overlay for us at ICPJ? Is that a consent-based thumb? Yeah. I know we use, one of the ways that we changed is that we moved to fist to five in our board. So we do like a fist to five for how we feel about, our next thing. So, 5 is like, yes, I agree a lot. 1 is like, I don't agree, a block, different things. So we'll see, like, we'll just try this out, a little consent-based, decision. So, are we ready to move to lunch? So let's see here, how's our consent? Okay, I see all 5s. I just wanna, oh, I see, it was a question. Thank you all for joining us on the Zoom. Let me stop the record.